Camping trip turns deadly. Young camper mauled by crocodile on remote Kimberley beach in Western Australia. A relaxing camping trip in remote Western Australia turned into a terrifying fight for survival after a young man was brutally attacked by a large crocodile while staying near a beach north of Broome. Now let's dive deeper and explore every layer of this story on our AI
So
podcast.
picture this for a second. You've actively sought out one of the most serene, untouched, just perfectly isolated beaches on the entire planet.
Oh, yeah. The kind where you really have to work for it.
Exactly. You've driven for hours down miles of these dusty, heavily rutted, totally unsealed roads. And you do it simply to get away from the crowds, the noise, the cell service.
Right. The ultimate escape.
Yeah. And you're finally sitting there staring out at the water, taking in the absolute remote beauty of the Australian coastline. And then, in a fraction of a second, that absolute serenity just shatters.
Completely shattered.
And you find yourself fighting for your actual life against an apex predator.
It's literally a nightmare scenario.
It really is. And that shattered illusion of safety, that's the focal point of our deep dive today. We're unpacking a really chilling incident recently reported out of Western Australia that honestly completely redefines the hidden cost of an untouched vacation.
Yeah, the details surrounding this specific encounter force us to confront a very uncomfortable biological reality. Because when we examine the geographical isolation of where this happened, the monumental statewide logistical effort required just to keep this victim alive.
Which we'll definitely get into.
Yeah, and the escalating history of human-wildlife overlap in this specific region, a very clear and honestly terrifying pattern emerges. It's all about what happens when modern recreation intersects with prehistoric hunting grounds.
And the location of this attack really acts as the central catalyst for everything that follows.
Absolutely.
So the victim, he's a man in his 20s, and he was camping on a highly popular coastal stretch near the Coolum Point Nature Reserve. Specifically, it's close to an area known as Hidden Creek.
Right, and for anyone trying to, visualize the map here, this is situated about 50 kilometers north of Broome,
Yeah.
deep up in the Kimberley region of Western Australia.
And accessing this specific coastline requires some genuine commitment.
Yeah.
I mean, you're utilizing the unsealed Minari Road on the Dampier Peninsula.
You're deliberately making the choice to pilot your vehicle off the paved safety of the grid. You're plunging into the red dirt, the dust, and just the profound isolation of the outback.
It essentially functions like trying to get access to the ultimate VIP getaway, right?
Oh, for sure.
You're willing to endure the punishing unsealed road and the complete lack of infrastructure because the reward is this incredible, exclusive, totally untouched beach. The source report really describes it as pristine.
Yeah, but the massive, potentially lethal catch here is that the bouncers at this particular VIP club are, well, they're prehistoric predators.
Well, yeah, prehistoric bouncers.
And that concept of the quote-unquote untouched beach is exactly what we need to dissect here.
Okay, unpack that a bit.
Well, the report explicitly highlights the dual nature of the Dampier Peninsula. It's heavily marketed and universally known among Broome locals and international tourists as this premier destination for profound natural beauty. Fantastic camping. But the very criteria that make a landscape untouched for a human, the lack of concrete, the absence of commercial development, the undisturbed waterways.
The things people go there for.
Exactly. Those are the exact same environmental markers of a thriving, fully intact ecosystem.
So when you're setting up your tent on an untouched beach in the Kimberley region, you aren't just like an observer looking at a pristine postcard.
No, not at all.
You're actively stepping inside a functioning food web.
You're inserting yourself into a habitat that hasn't been marginalized or pushed back by human industrialization. And the apex predator of that specific intact food web is the saltwater crocodile.
And they aren't just surviving in those tidal creeks and estuaries, are they?
No, they're actively dominating them. I mean, the environment is perfectly calibrated for their hunting style. So a human seeking undisturbed nature is essentially seeking out undisturbed crocodile territory.
And stepping inside that territory is incredibly beautiful right up until the very millisecond that the ecosystem decides to engage with you.
Yeah, that's the horrifying part.
Which brings us to the immediate aftermath of this attack, because the absolutely staggering logistical nightmare of trying to perform emergency trauma care in the outback is, well, it's almost unbelievable.
Okay, it really is.
The victim survives the initial physical encounter at Coolum Point, but surviving the bite is only the first hurdle.
Right. because he's sitting 50 kilometers away from even the closest regional hospital.
Yeah, located at the end of an unsealed dirt track.
The sheer tyranny of distance in Western Australia becomes an active adversary in a medical emergency. The geographical scale we are talking about is something that is remarkably difficult to overstate.
According to the WA Country Health Service, he's first transported to Broome Hospital for emergency stabilization.
Just to stabilize him, yeah.
But the cascade of medical logistics is only just beginning there. The report outlines that on Monday, due to the extreme seriousness of his injuries, he was flown by the Royal Flying Doctor Service.
Yeah, the RFDS.
Right, to Royal Perth Hospital to receive advanced medical care. And the source specifically notes that this location on the Dampier Peninsula is roughly 2,000 kilometers north of Perth.
To put a 2,000-kilometer medical evacuation into perspective, that is the equivalent of flying a trauma patient from London to Rome.
Wow.
Or like from New York to Miami, just to get them into an emergency room capable of handling their condition.
And the officials have been noticeably tight-lipped about the exact nature of the mauling, right? They explicitly stated they haven't publicly revealed the full extent of his injuries.
Yeah, they kept that quiet.
But the mechanism of his transport feels incredibly revealing to me. I mean, you don't utilize the Royal Flying Doctor Service to move a patient across an entire continent-sized state unless their condition is catastrophically severe.
Absolutely not. That 2,000-kilometer airlift serves as the ultimate indicator of the attack's sheer brutality.
Because it's not just a quick helicopter ride.
No, the Royal Flying Doctor Service isn't merely a transport plane. It operates as a fully functioning, pressurized flying intensive care unit.
Wow.
Moving a patient suffering from severe lacerations, potential crush injuries, massive blood loss at altitude requires highly specialized, advanced trauma coordination.
Right, so Broome Hospital can stabilize, but they can't fix it.
Exactly. Regional facilities are equipped to stop the bleeding, basically. But a saltwater crocodile mauling often inflicts complex orthopedic and vascular damage. That demands the specialized surgical teams you only find in major metropolitan trauma centers like Royal Perth.
It forces you to look at the hidden cost of remote camping that, never makes it into the tourism brochures.
Never. They don't print that on the pamphlets.
The distance from civilization, which is literally the primary psychological appeal of the trip, becomes directly proportional to your distance from life-saving care.
That's a great way to frame it.
I mean, the logistics of stabilizing a victim of a wild animal attack, navigating them back down an unsealed, rutted dirt road, getting them through the doors at Broome, and then coordinating a massive cross-state flight. It's a monumental, highly technical human effort just to counteract a few seconds of wild violence.
And with the victim currently fighting for his life in a hospital bed on the entire other side of the state, the institutional focus back up north immediately shifts to the sand where the attack actually occurred.
Right, because the authorities have to step in and basically deconstruct the event.
Yeah, the Department of Biodiversity, Conservation, and Attractions, the DBCA, was informed of the attack on Monday.
And the source details their immediate institutional response, right?
Right. Wildlife officers initiated conversations with a relative of the injured man, and they are actively planning further deep dive discussions with other individuals who were present during the incident.
Plus, crucially, they're conducting a highly detailed site inspection of the Coulomb Point area as part of this ongoing investigation.
They are systematically treating the campsite and the surrounding coastline like a forensic scene.
Now, when they inspect that site, I imagine they aren't looking for crocodile tracks as much as they are looking for human mistakes.
That's an interesting point.
Since we already know the culprit is an apex predator acting on instinct, the DBCA must be investigating the behavioral triggers that brought the human and the animal into contact, right? Are they looking for what specifically drew the animal in?
That is the core objective of a wildlife investigation in a case like this. The DBCA is trying to reconstruct the exact mechanics of the encounter to identify the failure points.
Failure points like what?
Well, a saltwater crocodile is an ambush predator. It operates on millions of years of evolutionary programming. It relies heavily on stealth, observing patterns, and utilizing its environment. So investigators are looking for the variables that inadvertently signaled an opportunity to that predator.
Variables like, say, setting up a campsite too close to the high water mark, or perhaps cleaning a catch of fish and leaving the waste near the water's edge.
Exactly. The olfactory senses, the sense of smell of a saltwater crocodile, are highly refined. They can detect the scent of decaying matter or fish waste from significant distances carried along the tidal currents.
That's terrifying.
It is. And furthermore, they're looking at the timing of the encounter. Like, were people swimming or washing dishes at the water's edge during dawn or dusk?
Oh, because those are the primary hunting hours, right?
Yes. The glare on the water and the low light provide the crocodile with optimal camouflage. So the investigation isn't necessarily about pointing a bureaucratic finger to assign blame.
Right. It's not about getting anyone in trouble.
No, it's about harvesting data to understand how the human behavior intersected with the biological reality of the predator.
Because they need that behavioral data to prevent the next encounter, which is clearly becoming an urgent priority. I mean, the data laid out in this report reveals that the attack at Coulomb Point was absolutely not some isolated 1 in a million freak occurrence.
No, not at all. The incident is part of a very clear, rapidly defined pattern of escalation.
The timeline provided in the report is honestly startling. This is the second crocodile attack in less than 5 months in this specific region.
Less than 5 months, yeah.
Back in January, a man suffered severe body lacerations after being attacked by a 3-meter saltwater crocodile near the remote Lejarder Bay community, which is also located on the Dampier Peninsula.
Right.
And looking further back into early 2024, another victim was attacked by another 3-meter saltwater crocodile while spearfishing near islands off the coast of One Arm Point.
And we need to pause on that size for a second. A 3-meter crocodile is nearly 10 feet of highly territorial, immensely powerful muscle.
10 feet long.
Yeah. At that size, you're looking at an animal that is fully capable of viewing an adult human as a viable prey item.
Which is just chilling.
Yeah.
And when you look at this timeline spearfishing near offshore islands, an attack near a remote bay community, and now a camper attack near a coastal creek, it completely invalidates the idea that this is just bad luck.
Right, you can't just chalk it up to a freak accident anymore.
It's absolutely not like being struck by lightning. It feels more like wandering onto an active multi-lane highway while wearing a blindfold. It's not a matter of if a vehicle is coming, but when your paths will physically intersect.
That's a really stark analogy, but it's incredibly accurate.
The sheer variety of activities leading to these attacks is what really stands out to me.
Yeah, that variety, actively hunting fish in the water, existing near a residential bay, or simply relaxing at a coastal campsite, it indicates that the danger profile remains identical regardless of your specific itinerary.
The crocs don't care if you're working or on vacation.
Exactly. If you connect this to the broader biological mechanics of the region, the repeated presence of 3-meter saltwater crocodiles actively engaging with humans across the entire Dampier Peninsula tells us we're looking at a thriving population.
So these aren't just like lost or transient animals passing through a human area.
Yeah.
Humans are passing through their permanent domain.
That's exactly it. Following decades of intensive conservation efforts in Australia, saltwater crocodile populations have robustly recovered from historical overhunting.
Oh, interesting. So they're actually a conservation success story.
They are. But as the carrying capacity of the prime habitats reaches saturation, you see large territorial subadults and adults expanding into literally every available tidal, creek, and coastal inlet.
Which is right where the tourists are going.
Right, because simultaneously, the human footprint in these remote areas is expanding. The frequency of tourists seeking out untouched, isolated beauty is naturally increasing.
So you have an increasing volume of human recreation pushing directly into a habitat that is densely populated by apex predators.
And the mathematical probability of these violent encounters is naturally going to skyrocket.
Which is exactly why the warnings issued by the authorities at the conclusion of this report carry such a heavy, uncompromising tone. They're being forced to deliver a stark reality check regarding the limitations of public safety in the outback.
Yeah, and the wording the authorities use in this reality check is really vital to parse.
Oh, for sure.
They issue a blanket reminder to the public that crocodiles are common across the entire Kimberley coastline and waterways. The list they provide is exhaustive beaches, rivers, estuaries, tidal creeks, waterholes, and offshore islands.
Basically any water.
Essentially, yes. They are stating that if a body of water is physically connected to the ocean in northern Australia, you just must operate under the assumption that a crocodile is present.
And the rangers are urging both locals and tourists to maintain constant caution when camping, fishing, or swimming. But the critical sentence from the DBCA really stood out to me. They stressed that public safety depends heavily on, quote, Personal awareness and responsible behavior in croc habitats.
Yeah. Personal awareness and responsible behavior. When a government agency utilizes that specific phrasing, they're acknowledging a profound shift in liability.
Right. Because to me, it reads like a bureaucratic, highly sanitized way of saying, you are actively entering the food chain, and the government absolutely cannot protect you out there.
Is that essentially what they're saying?
That is the raw, unvarnished truth of the situation. The authorities are basically conceding the limitations of human control over the natural world.
They can't exactly post a lifeguard at every hidden creek.
No.
Yeah.
They cannot geographically fence off every single tidal creek, hidden bay, or mangrove swamp along the thousands of kilometers of the northern Australian coastline. Furthermore, they can't systematically remove the predators, as the crocodiles are a protected keystone species.
They're vital to the health of the entire ecosystem.
Exactly.
So the traditional social contract of public safety, the comforting idea that the state paves the roads, puts up the guardrails, and ensures a space is generally safe for you to recreate in, that is completely null and void the moment your tires hit the unsealed red dirt of the Minori Road.
Null and void. You are leaving the jurisdiction of managed public safety and willingly entering the jurisdiction of the wild.
And in that jurisdiction, the onus of survival is transferred entirely to the individual.
It's all on you.
It is. Practicing responsible behavior requires an active, continuous acknowledgement that you are a potential prey item.
Which is wild to think about while you're trying to, relax on a beach.
Right. But it dictates strict behavioral modifications,
Right.
like completely avoiding the water at dawn and dusk, establishing campsites dozens of meters back from the high water mark, and maintaining immaculate waste management so you don't inadvertently create an olfactory trail leading straight to your tent.
But even with all those strict behavioral modifications, personal awareness is ultimately just a shield. I mean, it mitigates the threat, but it absolutely does not eliminate it.
No, it doesn't.
The ecosystem doesn't care how responsible you think you're being.
It doesn't. The biology of an ambush predator dictates that you will almost certainly never see the animal that attacks you until the exact moment the strike occurs.
Wow. We started this deep dive looking at a single, incredibly chilling news report about a young camper searching for a relaxing, untouched getaway 50 kilometers north of Broome.
Yeah.
And that search ended in a brutal, split-second fight for survival, followed by a deeply complex 2,000-kilometer medical evacuation flight across the entire state of Western Australia just to keep him breathing.
And through unpacking the logistics and the underlying biology of that single event, the true reality of the Dampier Peninsula comes into focus.
It really does.
The unsealed roads that offer the modern tourist the promise of profound, untouched natural beauty. They are leading them directly into the densely populated heart of a thriving, escalating population of 3-meter apex predators.
We've traced a clear, undeniable pattern of violence over the last 5 months, from a victim spearfishing near offshore islands at one arm point, to an attack near a residential bay community, to this latest mauling at a coastal campsite at Coolum Point.
It's a consistent pattern.
The overlap between human recreation and prehistoric hunting grounds is rapidly becoming a critical, unavoidable issue. And we've seen the wildlife authorities essentially throw their hands up, declaring that your safety is entirely your own responsibility once you make the choice to enter that habitat.
Which leaves us with a profound, highly uncomfortable tension to consider.
Yeah.
Because the authorities heavily emphasize responsible behavior and personal awareness as the required keys to coexisting in these popular remote tourist areas. But as we watch these brutal, life-altering attacks continue to happen, to campers, to fishermen, to individuals who may very well have believed they were doing everything exactly right, we are forced to ask a much harder question.
Which is?
At what point does responsible behavior simply mean staying away entirely? Are there some places on Earth so wild and so inherently perfectly designed for predators that humans simply shouldn't vacation there? Regardless of how pristine and beautiful the beach looks on a map.
That is a chilling question to leave you with, and one that forces a complete reevaluation of the allure of the completely untouched wild. The next time you find yourself dreaming of seeking out that perfectly isolated, pristine, empty beach at the end of a long, dusty dirt road, maybe take a second to ask yourself exactly why it's so incredibly empty. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Okay, one question for you. With this being the second crocodile attack in less than 5 months, are crocodile numbers or aggressive encounters increasing in the Kimberley region, and what is causing the rise in danger now? Don't forget to comment it. Thanks.